In my experience, too many entrepreneurs, myself included, spend way too much time worrying about what we have to do to succeed.
Get ready to build, protect, and sell your expertise online with the Online Genius Podcast. You'll laugh. We hope you won't cry. But you'll always be informed and prepared so you can have the success you want. Here's your host, Bobby Klinck.
Hey there. Welcome to episode 46 of the Online Genius Podcast. I am your host, Bobby Klinck, and I am absolutely giddy about today's show. Now, I'm giddy because I've got some great news to share with you, but also because I think this is a pretty amazing episode that every entrepreneur needs to hear. But before I dive into the content, I want to tell you about the news, about some changes that are coming your way. Now, first, I'm going to be making some changes here on the podcast. Among other things, I'm going to focus more on making each episode a bit of a masterclass on a topic relevant to you as an online entrepreneur. But I'm also going to be more intentional in how the episodes are organized. Now, I'm going to be putting together things in themes so that you have a bunch of episodes together that kind of flow naturally and fit together from week to week, so that next week's show will kind of flow naturally from this week's show until we finish a theme, and then we'll start a new theme. But even within the themes themselves, I'm going to go through kind of a natural progression, or that's my hope. But other than that, another big piece of news and change is that the podcast is also going to become something of a hub around which I'm going to be creating a bunch of content each week. I'll be creating additional live trainings and some content related to the podcast topics. I'm going to be doing Q&A sessions on a weekly basis. And all of that's going to be happening in my free Facebook group, which is now called the Online Genius Community. It's all about helping you as an online entrepreneur foster and build your genius online and build your amazing business. Now, if you're not a member of that group yet, you can head over to youronlinegenius.com/community, and that'll take you to a place where you can ask to join the group. Now, there's some questions. Make sure you answer them. If you don't answer those questions, I'm not going to let you in. That's my little test. Now, it's not hard. I really don't care what you answer. I just want to make sure that you answer and are committed before you get in. So head on over to youronlinegenius.com/community, and that way you'll be sure you're not going to miss out on all this great additional bonus content on a weekly basis. Now, in addition to the changes here on the podcast, though, I'm also going to be making some changes in other parts of my business. And part of this is coming from what we're actually going to be talking about in today's show. So part of this is I'm continuing to grow as an entrepreneur, and I'm continuing to try to get better. And through that process, I have continued to evolve my business. So going forward, a big part of the change is that I'm going to give you access to even more free content and training about the legal stuff. Now, the idea is that, this is stuff that I only used to have available for my paid members, but now I'm going to make it available absolutely free to anyone and everyone so that I can serve more, so that I can make sure that you know what you need to be doing to get your business. At this point going forward, the only thing that people are going to have to pay for from me are legal templates and any one-on-one time you want with me, whether through my law firm or if I later have some coaching program or something like that. But beyond that, I want to tell you what you got to do, and I want to give that to you free and educate you so that you know what you need to know about the legal stuff. So that's some exciting changes I've got coming down the pipe. Now, this week's episode, I'm excited about because it is the first episode in this new theme-based series. So the first theme that we're going to be doing is relating to what you need to be doing to set your business up for success from the get-go. Now, some of this is going to be legal stuff and some of it's going to be, more businessy stuff. And so we're going to be talking about that over the coming weeks. And today's episode is all about a pretty fundamental concept. We're going to be talking about who you have to be as a person to succeed as an entrepreneur. Now, again, you heard me say that. We're going to focus on who you have to be. In my experience, too many entrepreneurs, myself included, spend way too much time worrying about what we have to do to succeed. But this is actually putting the cart before the horse. In today's episode, I'm going to talk to you all about the basic piece that so many of us miss, including myself. And that is, let's talk about what we have to be before we talk about what we're going to do. That's what we're going to be talking about this week. But before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by the new Online Genius Academy. Now, if you're like most online entrepreneurs, I know that I talk to, one of your biggest concerns is that you don't know what you don't know about the legal stuff. And that's why I created the Online Genius Academy. It's a library with dozens of videos that walk you through the legal stuff without the jargon. And the best part is that it's absolutely free. This is what used to be paid training that now I'm making absolutely free. And you can sign up for free by going to youronlinegenius.com/academy. Now it's time to dive into this week's episode. Now, over the past few years, I've learned a lot of really, really important lessons about succeeding as an entrepreneur. A lot of it is about what not to do, because I've done a lot of that stuff that you shouldn't do. But I have to say, hands down, the most important lesson I've learned is one that I have to admit I completely stumbled into without really trying or knowing anything about. I'm reminded of that saying about a blind squirrel finding a nut every now and then, because that's really what it is here. Now, I have to admit to you, for a long time, I was focused 100% on the tactics and marketing strategies and the cool tools and all of these other things that were out there that we as online entrepreneurs could use and could do. And you know, what did I need to do with social media? And what did I need to do with funnels? And what did I need to do with this, that, and the other? And guess what? Even though I was able to actually coach all kinds of other people about that, I mean, people would come to me, entrepreneurs would come to me because I was the legal guy, but I could actually help them with all these tips, tricks, and strategies about marketing, etc. But even with that, my business was a flop. And my business was a flop because I had never taken the time to focus at looking at who I was at a fundamental level. And it was when I made that change, again, not because I had some grand awakening, not because, I all of a sudden got smart, but because I got to be honest with you, I was sitting in church and, on New Year's Eve, and the pastor was talking about giving. And I said, well, you know what? Hey, that'll be one of my words for the year. And that moment that has nothing to do with spirituality or religion or anything like that changed everything in my business, because all of a sudden I discovered that I needed to be focusing on who I was, not what I did. And so the key takeaway that we're going to talk about in today's show is that you need to worry about who you are, not about the tools, not about the tactics, not about the strategies. And now, once you get to the point that you have focused on who you are, then you can turn to it. But I firmly believe that success is 90% or more about your mindset and who you are, and only 10% or so about the strategies and tactics you employed. And I got to be honest, that is crazy for me to say. And that is a revelation that I've had over this past year or so, a little less. And I've come to it by seeing it play out in my own business. And so in today's episode, I'm going to walk you through the 4 key things that I believe every entrepreneur needs to be to have lasting success. These are 4 attributes of your person that you need to adopt if you're going to want to succeed. So let's dive into those 4 key attributes. First, be a giver. Now, this one to me is fundamental. It is the first level. It is the most important attribute. Now, you've probably heard all about this when you're listening to people talk about how to be successful as an entrepreneur. They talk about you have to give and you have to give, etc. And so maybe you've adopted some of that and you've been giving. And I got to be honest with you, I've been doing that for a while. I mean, I gave free content, I did all of these things, and I was thinking about various ideas. The problem, though, is that too often entrepreneurs, myself included, think of giving as something you do, not who you are. For this to be successful, giving can't be just another marketing tactic. If you're giving just so that people will feel that they have to pay you or that they have to do something with you, it's not going to work. Because if that's how you view it, they are going to sense that you are doing this as a transactional basis. And then you are not a giver. Now, I'm probably dating myself here with this notion, but there was a Friends episode when I was younger where they talked about the notion that there's no such thing as altruism because when you give, you're ultimately doing it to make yourself feel happy. And maybe there's some of that, and maybe there's something to that. But the important thing is that if you're giving simply to get someone to give back to you as kind of a quid pro quo, it's never going to work. But I'm going to talk about some other places where entrepreneurs give and think, hey, I'm giving, but it's not successful because it's not about who they are. It's not that they've become a giver. It's because they're giving to avoid something else. Now, one of the places this comes up is that a lot of people give a ton of content that they shouldn't be giving because they're scared to ask for money. Now, that is not a recipe for success. In that case, again, you're doing the giving not because you have become a giver, but because you're scared. And that is not going to work. If that's your problem, if you're giving your time in one-on-one consultations with people and coaching, etc., and not getting paid or getting anything back, that's not a recipe for success, obviously. Because again, at that point, you're treating giving as something to do, not who you are. Now, another example and another place where this comes up is people will give because they have convinced themselves that promotion is slimy. This is related. They're scared to promote because they think it's wrong or bad or something like that. Again, in that case, you're not giving because you are a giver. You're giving because of something else. And that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is where you come to the point of you as a person are a giver. You don't have to think twice. You don't have to concentrate on giving. It's not something on your to-do list. You just do it because it is who you are. Now, if you want to have a resource on this, there is a fantastic book, The Go-Giver, that you need to go read or listen to on Audible or do whatever you want to do, however you consume your books. This is a book that if you don't know about it, it kind of teaches the concept of giving and being a giver through a parable, through kind of a story of someone who's learning these various concepts. And I love the book because in it, they talk about this concept that you don't give because you want something back. You just give because that's who you are. And that is a great book. It is a great way to drive it home. So you don't have to listen to me. Go get The Go-Giver and really try to internalize that. But see, here's the funny thing. I have to be honest with you that it's kind of, I don't know if sad is the right word, but it's kind of funny or sad or something like that, that I didn't get this before this year. See, I had figured it out in my personal relationship, meaning I couldn't do nice things for my wife so that she would do nice things back for me because then it feels transactional and she would sense that. No. I needed to give to my wife because I love her and because I just wanted to give to her. And I got that. I mean, I figured that out a while ago. I'm not so dense that I don't figure those kinds of things out. But somehow I never translated that into my business world. Until again, I said this year is when it really made a change. I mean, I last year had been giving things away and giving free value and doing things like that, but I was never doing it because I was a giver. I was doing it as a tactic, some way, shape, or form. Now this year, I committed that giving was going to be one of my words for the year. And I have to admit, at the beginning of the year, I was still in the doing phase. So I did this series of masterclasses and I decided to do a pay what you want model. And I did that in my mind saying, oh, well, this is about giving. No, I did that because I was afraid to ask for money. I didn't do it because I was trying to be giving. I did it because I was afraid to say this is worth X and this is how much you should pay. I was treating it as a tactic to avoid something I didn't want to have to deal with. But as the year has moved on, things have changed fundamentally for me. I give of myself every day in so many ways, often unrelated into the service I provide as the legal guy. I provide value in Facebook groups by encouraging people, by providing resources about, how to do marketing things and how to apply this strategy. And here's a tool I found that's useful. And I just do that. And people are amazed and they say, how are you able to spend all this time on social media being a cheerleader, being an encourager, being all of this? And I said, I don't know. I just do it. It's not on my list. I don't have to think about it because I have internalized that is what I am. And I'm continuing to do that. And what I have to tell you is that this year, every time I have strayed from giving and giving more and started to think of things transactionally, things have gone downhill in my business. On the other side, every time that I have gone back to this being a giver and simply giving my time, giving information, giving of resources, things have taken off. Now, I don't know. It may be the case that at some point I'm going to get somewhere where I give too much. But I think that's a good problem to have. Because again, at this point, I'm no longer giving because I'm hiding or I'm scared to ask for money or I think promotion is slimy or anything like that. No, I'm giving because I want to give. I want to serve more. I want to make this available to as many people as possible. And again, this is part of my ongoing message and my ongoing, growth as an entrepreneur. I mentioned I am launching the Academy, which you can join, which you get tons of information that I'm just giving you. A lot of people would say, no, you're crazy. Charge people for that. And I shouldn't say would say. A lot of people did tell me that. And I said, no, I'm going to give it away. I've made that decision that I want that stuff to be free for you, for anyone else who needs it, because you deserve it. It shouldn't be stuff that's hidden behind a paywall. And so I continue to move towards being a giver. And I think it's something that we will all struggle with. But once you internalize it, once you get to the point that you're doing this day in and day out, and it just becomes who you are and you don't have to think about it, you will have a real change in your business. So again, the first key attribute is be a giver. That takes us to the second attribute, which is be humble. Now, this one can be hard for some people. For some of you, it may not be, but I got to admit, as a guy who went to Harvard Law School, who's always been top of his class, who's always been, shall we say, a bit self-assured, I sometimes have a tough time with this one, but I've worked on it. And I've found that being humble is so very, very important in your business. Now, there's a couple of reasons why being humble ends up helping you. Number one, humble people accept coaching. Now, when I look back over my career, but also over other aspects of my life, I realize that pretty much all of the biggest breakthroughs I've made, or at least some of them, a good number of them, came as a result of coaching. Not because necessarily someone was smarter than me or because of anything else, but because, look, people outside of your situation can always see better than you can. And it's funny, I recognize this concept in a lot of other places. For example, in my legal writing, I always accepted that someone else would be able to edit my writing better than I would. But somehow it took me a while to get this on broader concepts. And so again, I'm going to give you an example. Until a few years ago, I was mainly doing a lot of work called litigation, handling lawsuits. And I didn't really like it. But I'd been doing it for a long time. And I was good at it. But then I started talking to a coach and we worked through a bunch of stuff. And at some point she asked me, she said, "Do you like what you do?" I said, "Well, not really, but I'm good at it. And I built a career at it." And she said, "So what?" And she pushed me to decide whether I should keep doing this thing that I didn't really enjoy or instead move towards what I wanted to be doing. And it was only as a result of that coaching that I made the pivot to do what I'm now doing. And so it was only because I was humble enough to listen to this coach who was savvy enough to look at my situation from the outside that I was able to actually make a change that has made me so much happier and led to so much greatness in my life. And by greatness, I'm talking about personal happiness, all of that. I'm not talking about, outside. But it was also as a result of a different coach that I finally put the stake in the ground and niched down. Because forever I was saying, I want to be broad. I want to serve more. But I was really, again, doing that because I was scared. But someone on the outside looked at me and said, "No, you need to pick a spot and be there." And so I've done it. So that's the first reason why being humble is important, because it will allow you to be open to be coached from the outside. Now, second, being humble will allow you to listen, because humble people are willing to listen to others rather than wanting to be the ones talking. And I got to be honest with you, this one was really tough for me because I wasn't exactly raised that way. I got to be honest with you, I'm from a family where a lot of people like to talk a lot. For example, they want to talk for 30 minutes or 45 minutes at a party of theirs giving a big toast about how great they are. That's just kind of who they are, who we are as a family. But you know what? That's not going to help you in the long run. And I got to be honest, I was always someone who was pretty darn sure I knew what I needed to know, so I wasn't someone who always listened. But, there's someone I follow and I listen to quite a bit is Amy Porterfield, and she tells this story about growing up. Her dad constantly told her, "Listen more than you talk." Now, I got to tell you, that I think is some of the best advice you could ever employ. Because it's when you listen to people that you learn. If you're talking, you're not learning. And what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of places where you're going to need to learn as an entrepreneur. One of the biggest ones is you need to listen to your audience. You need to listen to what they're saying. You need to listen to what they want. You need to listen to what they're worried about. You need to listen to their pain points. And if you're telling them what they need to worry about, if you're telling them what they should be worried about, if you're telling them all of these things instead of listening, you're going to miss out. And I used to do that. I used to be the guy who was going to tell people the legal stuff they needed to worry about. Well, guess what? That's not going to work. At the end of the day, most people aren't going to, listen to what I have to say if I'm not speaking their language. And so, you've got to listen to this. And so, for example, when I started doing this, I started hearing the same phrases over and over again that become valuable. My audience talks about not knowing what they don't know. My audience talks about the legalese and the jargon, and they talk about these things and about how law is painful. The legal stuff is painful. And so when I started listening, that's when I was actually able to start engaging in the conversation. But until you get to that point of being humble enough to listen, you're never going to be there. Now, here's another way that being humble matters. Now, this is an important lesson that Marie Forleo taught me, which is you have to give your audience what they want, not what you think they need. Now, you maybe can slip in some of what they need, but you're selling them what they want. And you think about that in my world. People don't want to listen to me talk about the legal stuff for hours and hours on end. That's why I've got this podcast. I talk to you about marketing and I give you these tidbits and I bring on experts to talk about this stuff. And then I give you a little bit of the legal stuff too, because you need to know that stuff. But more importantly, ask yourself a question like this. Does your customer really want a signature course that's going to take them hours and hours and hours to get through? Or do they maybe just want a cheat sheet with some templates they can use or some swipe copy? Now, some customers will want those signature courses, but maybe not. And you need to be willing and be humble enough to accept what your customers tell you they want and what they really want. It's not always what they tell you. I've learned that myself. Sometimes what people believe they want isn't actually what they want, but you have to give them what they want, what they will actually react to, what they will actually respond to, not what you believe they should want or that they need. Again, you have to be humble to do that. If you're not humble, if you are sure that you're right and they're wrong, you're not going to listen and you're not going to actually react to what they want. And again, I've, had to eat some humble pie recently myself. I mean, I spent much of this year trying to develop training programs and courses and all that. And then, I was talking to another online entrepreneur who's helping me put together my content strategy. And she said, "You're not doing it right." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Look, you have great products, but for the most part, the legal stuff isn't something that your customers are going to want courses and memberships and all that. No, they want an answer to their problem quick and easy," which is funny because that's what I tell people I offer is I make it quick, easy, and affordable to get your legal protection in place. And so talking with this entrepreneur, she said, "Look, I think you ought to just focus on, give people training, talk about what they need and sell them templates. They don't need a course. They don't need anything else. They need the templates." And, the funny thing is, in talking with this entrepreneur, she was quite sure that I was going to be mad about the whole concept because she was telling me that I was doing it wrong. But I said, you know what? Let me be humble. Let me listen to what she has to say. And then let me actually go back and look. And, at this point, I was willing to look at the numbers and guess what? She was right. But I never would have gotten to the point of figuring it out if I hadn't been humble enough to hear her tell me this message. What I discovered is that I was spending most of my money and about 95% of my time selling products that were way less than 50% of my revenue. But again, I wouldn't have seen that if I was so self-assured that I was unwilling to be humble and to listen to what this entrepreneur told me. So again, you need to bring that kind of humble attitude to your business, to be willing to be coached, sometimes by a coach, sometimes just by someone who knows you and can see what you're doing is wrong. So be humble. That's the second attribute you need as an entrepreneur. Now, the third important key attribute is you must be intentional. Now, what this means is you need to have a plan before you take action. Now, we've all heard this concept. In Stephen R. Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. In other words, be intentional. Know where you're going before you start. But even though we know this concept, too many of us are just doing without being intentional about what we're doing. There's no plan. And if there's no plan, there's no chance of success. And all the activity in the world isn't going to do a lot of good if you're not intentional about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so, there's a lot of places where this comes in, sometimes in my life and sometimes in other places. In my life, I have to admit, I was treating my content, for example, in a very unintentional way for a long time. I was just kind of randomly putting things out there. That is not a recipe for success. Just, putting stuff out there without a plan, without a thought, etc., is not going to work. You need to bring a level of intentionality to every part of your business. And what does this mean? Well, one of the things I will see is that people often are very disjointed in their business. Now, you're in business to make money. So there's a process that's you're going to have to go through. You're going to have to attract attention from people. You're going to have to figure out a way to message them. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to sell something to them. And then what are you going to sell to them? But see, here's the problem. You got to start with the end in mind. And what does that mean? Well, the first thing you need to figure out is again, let me be clear. You have to figure out a lot of these other things first. But when you put together a plan, you need to know, what are you going to sell to your customers? You can't figure out how you're going to sell it to them before you know what you're going to sell. Now, I see this a lot of times where people will sign up for courses in the wrong order. They sign up for things about marketing a product before they figured out what their product is. And you've got to know first, what is your product? What is it that you sell? And again, you can make changes, you can evolve this over time, but that's got to be a critical thing you've got to know. And then you got to say, okay, well, how am I going to sell that to people? And you might decide you're going to sell it through webinars or launch videos or something else, but you got to know, how are you going to sell it to people? And then you got to figure out from there, okay, so here's my product. Here's how I'm going to sell it to them. Well, how am I going to build my audience? And all of this needs to be related. If you're building an audience in one place that has to do with topic one, and you're going to sell a product that's not even related to topic one, it's never going to work. And all of your efforts of creating a product and building an audience and all that are not going to work. And let me give you an example of this. I've told the story many times that my first foray into selling a digital product was a complete flop. I developed a course called Safeguard Your Online Genius, and I launched it after spending a ton of money on ads, and nobody bought. And, when I looked through it, there's a lot of reasons why people didn't buy. Some of it is probably my messaging was not good. I was not listening. I wasn't being humble. I wasn't doing a lot of the things that I needed to be doing. But a lot of it was also that there was a complete disconnect in how I was building my email list, which was then what I was using to try to sell the product. So the ads team I'd been working with was in creating my Facebook ads. We had this great freebie about how to get stock images the right way that was actually getting some pretty good signups. The problem was we were marketing it to people who were never going to sign up and were not the people for my course. We were marketing it to people with a photography interest, for example. Well, I'm not selling to photographers. That was not who my messaging was for. And so because I didn't have this overall plan where I was putting everything together and being intentional, it wasn't going to work. So you have to have this kind of intentionality and plan about everything you do, or you're not going to succeed. But you also have to be intentional about other things in your business, like where are you spending your money? Now, this is a good thing to do on a regular basis. Go through your credit card statements or your bank statements and look at things and say, where am I spending my money? And should I be spending it somewhere else? Could I get more bang for my buck by taking those dollars and spending them elsewhere? And am I just throwing money away on some things? If you don't do that, you're going to have some problems. But we also have to be intentional about how we spend our time. Again, action isn't what matters. At the end of the day, you have to produce. And if you're not intentional about how you spend your time, you're not going to be producing because you're going to be spending your time on things that aren't ultimately valuable and important to your mission. So you constantly need to be doing this and to going back and saying, okay, what is important to my business? Where should I be spending my time? What should I be doing? And you have to think about that on a regular basis. So that's part of being intentional. But at the same time, there's a real catch here. And some people, I think, go to the other extreme here. You can't let being intentional become an excuse to stop you from acting. One of my favorite quotes is from General Patton from World War II fame, and he said, "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week." It's another way of saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You can't sit there and say, I'm not going to act until I have a perfect plan, because that's not being intentional. That's hiding behind perfectionism or the concept of intentionality to avoid acting. At the end of the day, the successful entrepreneurs are the ones who take action. They get an idea, they create a plan that's good enough, and then they act. And if it works, or if it shows some promise, they say, okay, I'm going to iterate and make this better. Now, outside of the online entrepreneurship space, in the tech space, there's a concept known as the MVP, the minimally viable product. The idea is you don't develop your entire software as a service program with all of the bells and whistles and then launch. No. You develop the minimally viable product and launch and see if it is successful or showing some signs of success. And if so, then you say, okay, I'm going to make it better in version 2.0. And then I'm going to make it better in version 3.0 and 4.0, etc. You keep iterating and making it better. That's what we need to be doing as online entrepreneurs. That means you're going to take action and you're going to try to do it in ways that are strategic and intentional and relate to your overall plan and see if they work. And if they do, you say, okay, well, hey, I'm going to think about that and I'm going to maybe, spend some more time on this or develop this more. And if it doesn't work, you say, okay, I'm going to cut that one and I'm going to do something else. So you need to be intentional about what you're doing, but don't let that stop you from acting. Now, I'm going to give you an example of where it's just kind of a silly example, and it's not really in the online space. It was with my website for my law firm. For a long time, I had a website. I didn't like my law firm website. And so I had decided I was going to redo it. And I built a basic shell that was already better than my existing website. There's no doubt I could have launched that right then and it would have been better. But there were some things I wanted to tweak, to improve, to add this, to add that. And so I waited and I sat on it. 8 or 9 months later, I was still sitting on it. And in that time, just so you have a sense, this was when I was kind of first getting my feet into this marketing world. My existing website had literally no lead capture on it. My new site that I'd already had put together had that, but I was waiting. So I lost 8-9 months of potential leads because I wanted to be perfect instead of going with good enough. Don't do that. Don't make that mistake. Find a plan that is good enough, be intentional about it, and take action, and then be intentional about deciding that you're going to make decisions based upon what you see. And then you will have success. So the third attribute, you have to be intentional. And that brings us to the fourth key attribute, and this one's hard for people. You have to be committed. And a lot of people say, yeah, I'm committed. But this came to me as I was hearing a story from Jim Thornton was talking with James Wedmore on his podcast, and I was listening to it. And he was just asking him some questions about, did you get up this morning and think about whether you were going to go buy a pack of cigarettes? And James said, well, of course not. And Jim said, well, why not? He said, because I'm not a smoker. And I said, that makes sense. And then I thought back to the time, there was a year where I got into unbelievable shape and I went from literally couch potato to running a marathon 11 months later. And I thought about it and I said, what was it about that year that was different? Well, one of the most important things, I was committed to working out. There was simply no question in my mind that I was going to work out. And by that, I mean, I was going to work out 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, every single day without fail. I was going to be out of my bed at 4:45, at the gym at 5 when it opened, and I was going to work out for an hour and a half, maybe more, every single day. Now, Saturday, I went in a little bit later because it didn't open as early. Didn't have to get to work. But again, I was committed that I was going to work out that hour and a half every day. And when I say I'm committed on this, I mean, literally, this is when I lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and had a great life, knocked off every day at 5:30 or earlier. Every single Wednesday played poker with the same group of people. Sometimes those poker nights would go till midnight, 1 in the morning. Guess what? I still got up on Thursday morning and was at the gym by 5 a.m. There simply was no question that I was going to do that every single day without question, without exception. And it wasn't about something I was doing because I simply was committed. That's who I was. I had become a committed person. And that story I tell you because that's the kind of commitment you're going to need as an entrepreneur. When I was thinking about this lesson, I was reminded of a movie that I enjoy called The American President. And towards the end, the fictional president, Andrew Shepard, gives a speech. And one of the things he says in that speech is this: America isn't easy. America is advanced citizenship. You got to want it bad because it's going to put up a fight. Well, I couldn't think of a better way to explain entrepreneurship. Replace America there with entrepreneurship, and it is a perfect quote. Because it's not going to be easy to be an online entrepreneur. No, it's going to be hard. It's going to knock you down, but it's also going to kick you while you're down. And it's going to do everything in its power to convince you that you should quit because there's something better to do. You should go get a job, or you should do something else because this is not going to work. And what I'll tell you is, if you talk to the successful entrepreneurs, they all have their stories about when they got knocked down and when things weren't working, etc. And what they'll tell you is that the successful entrepreneurs aren't necessarily the smartest. They're not the most tech savvy. They're not the most outgoing or anything else. The successful entrepreneurs are the ones who didn't give up. They were committed and kept showing up day in and day out. They did the Facebook Lives every day, even though nobody watched. They produced their podcast for months without seeing any good results because they knew they had to keep showing up. You got to put in the work, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be a long slog to do it. But aside from the fact that it's going to take a while, you're going to have moments where everything tells you to give up. I've had plenty of those moments myself. There was the point when I first decided I wanted to get on podcasts, and I spent a ton of money paying a company that helps you get booked as a guest on podcasts. And I didn't see a dime in response. I didn't get a client. I don't even know that I got that many leads from it. Or there was the time I mentioned where I launched my first online course that was a flop called Safeguard Your Online Genius. Let me tell you the details of that. I'd spent over $10,000 on Facebook ads. One person signed up, and that person then asked for a refund on day 29 after never having logged in. Now, you can think about where I was right then. It would have been pretty easy to say, screw this online entrepreneurship stuff. I'm going to go back to being a lawyer. Or I could also tell you the story about how earlier this year I signed up for a program about how to create a high ticket program and spent, again, 5 figures, including the cost of the program and the ads, etc., and how I got $0 back. It would have been very easy for me to take that as a sign that I should give up on this whole thing. You're going to have those moments too. And if you give up, you will not succeed. I can't guarantee that you're going to have success if you keep going, but I can guarantee that you will not have success if you quit. So if you want to do this, you have to be committed that you're going to be at this through the thick and through the thin, through the hard and the easy, and that you're going to put in the time to show up and do the work. And the only way you're going to do that is if you have become a committed person. It can't be that you're going to act committed. No, you have to be committed or it's never going to work. So that's the fourth attribute. So again, the key takeaway I want you to take from today's episode is that you need to start by focusing on what you need to be before worrying about the tactics, the tools, the strategies, or anything else. No tools are going to save you. None of these fancy programs or systems for generating leads or funnels or any of that. None of that's going to do you any good if you don't have the right attributes in place to start with. You could have the best software, the best accounting software, the best course software. All of that isn't going to be worth a dime if you have not committed and become a giver, if you're not humble, if you're not intentional, and if you're not committed. And you can probably think of other things that you need to be. But those are what I would consider the 4 key attributes that you're going to need as an entrepreneur. Now, that's it for this week's episode of the Online Genius podcast. I hope you're enjoying the show. And if so, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And bonus points, if you'll take the time, a couple of minutes to leave a review on iTunes or whatever it is where you get this podcast, and then take the time to share an episode with others who you think could use it. And also don't forget to join the Online Genius community by heading over to youronlinegenius.com/community. We'll be talking more about the keys to success there this week. And then in future weeks, we'll be getting deeper. I'm going to be doing some live training on a lot of aspects of, the legal stuff and some of the marketing stuff that people ask me about all the time. So I'm going to be showing you stuff there that's going to be incredibly valuable to supplement the podcast. So that's it. I'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Online Genius Podcast.
Thanks for listening. And remember to visit mistakes.youronlinegenius.com to get your essential guide to the 4 legal mistakes that can doom your business and how to avoid them. Join us next week for another episode to expand your online genius and your success.